just how unstable the planet has become in recent times? Over the past few days, we've seen major volcanic eruptions in Costa Rica and Indonesia. And according to Volcano Discovery, which we're showing here now, some 40 volcanoes around the planet are erupting at this present time. As you can see on this map, the red triangular icons represent the numbers of volcanoes across the globe that are presently active. And then as we begin to scroll down on this web page, you will see the numbers of volcanoes along with the names and the countries that they represent that are presently active. It is somewhere in the range of 40 to 42 volcanoes which are active at this time, which of course is an alarming number. Meanwhile, earthquakes continue to shake the globe with increasing regularity. Just last week, Ecuador was hit by a magnitude 6.7 earthquake and a magnitude 6.8 earthquake in rapid succession. Now, the series of quakes that are happening in Ecuador now are a result of the April 16th quake, which was very devastating to the country. And we'd like to show a video to you now that will show just exactly how strong this earthquake was that occurred on April the 16th. So take a look at this. Now, as you can see on this website, earthquaketrack.com, that there has been more than 3,000 earthquakes in the past month of magnitude 1.5 or greater. And you can also see on the map that all of the biggest earthquakes are all centered around the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. So it certainly looks like we're heading into a period of tribulation, a perfect storm, if you will, which will bring about changes that most of us would not even dare to imagine at this time. So let's review the volcanic eruptions that have occurred in recent days. The eruption in Costa Rica took authorities completely by surprise, and a thick layer of dust and ash was seen coating vehicles in buildings some 30 miles away in the capital city of San Jose. Now, smoke and ash was seen belching some 9,800 feet into the air. In addition, hundreds of people had gone to hospitals complaining of breathing difficulties and skin problems. Schools were shut down, and some flights into the country were canceled or diverted. People in the capital of San Jose, which is 30 miles west of the terrible volcano, said that layers of ash had coated buildings and cars, and there was this fierce smell of sulfur in the air. Now, leading up to this eruption, there were swarms of small earthquakes in the vicinity of the volcano. But scientists assured the public that these earthquake swarms were not signs of an imminent eruption. So what the scientists are telling the public in essence is that we shouldn't be concerned or worried about these earthquake swarms. So keep that in mind, because later in this presentation I'm going to show you something. So let's take a look at the other major eruption that is happening right now. Down in Indonesia, Mount Sinabung has violently erupted, and of course this is causing all sorts of chaos. In fact, several people who were farming within the red zone, which is an area 4 kilometers from Sinabung, which had been declared off limits by government authorities for safety reasons, those people that were in that area were consumed by a pyroclastic flow. Now take a look at this series of pictures, which will show you just how devastating the eruption of Mount Sinabung in Indonesia was. And this is just one example of how volcanoes that were once considered to be inactive are coming to life all over the world. In fact, prior to 2010, Mount Sinabung had been dormant for about 400 years. Now take a look at this amazing rare footage of the Mount Sinabung volcano eruption on May 21st, which killed 7 people and injured many others. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, just prior to the eruption of the terrible volcano in Costa Rica, there were significant earthquake swarms in the vicinity of the volcano. Well, the exact same thing is happening at 3 major volcanoes in the United States at the present time. So I would like to show you 3 images that came from Google Earth via the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. Now, the first image shows the earthquake activity that has taken place in the area around Mount St. Helens in recent days. Now, over the past month, there have been 95 earthquakes in the region, and most of them have been centered right along the core of the volcano, as you can see by the circled red area in the photo. Now this next image shows what has been happening at Mount Rainier. Now, Mount Rainier is one of the most dangerous mountains in America, and any type of severe volcanic activity in that area would be devastating to the surrounding area, including the city of Seattle itself. Now, there have been 36 earthquakes at Mount Rainier over the past month. And once again, most of them have occurred right along the core of the volcano. Mount Hood is also a very dangerous volcano. There have been 126 earthquakes in the vicinity of Mount Hood in recent days. And as you can see in this image, that the earthquakes have been centered very tightly on a spot on the south face of the mountain. Now, this is alarming because it was also the south side of Mount St. Helens that violently erupted back in 1980. When major Earth and climate change activity takes place in other parts of the globe, many Americans don't seem to care too much because they don't think that this rise in global Earth and climate change activity is any sort of a threat to them personally. But the truth here is that the entire west coast of the United States lies along the Ring of Fire, and virtually every other section of the Ring of Fire is roaring to life these days. If you are not familiar with the Ring of Fire, just imagine a giant ring that runs around the outer perimeter of the Pacific Ocean. Approximately 90% of all earthquakes and approximately 75% of all volcanic eruptions occur within this area, and the entire west coast of North America is considered to be part of the Ring of Fire. For so long, the west coast has been incredibly blessed not to have experienced a major seismic event. But scientists now tell us that it is only a matter of time. Like the Japanese earthquake and tsunamis in 2011 that killed nearly 16,000 people, seismologists say there is an impending disaster coming this way. 70 miles off America's Pacific Northwest, from Northern California to Vancouver Island, is the fault line known as the Cascadia subduction zone, where the oceanic plate is slowly being forced beneath the North American plate. Now the plate buckles upward and it gets pushed backward like a spring until eventually, after a few hundred years, it just has to let go. Now, for 25 years, Oregon State earthquake geologist Chris Goldfinger has warned of the possibility of disaster. He and other scientists have been collecting core samples of sediment from the ocean floor. They've discovered that major earthquakes happen here an average of every 240 years. The last major Cascadia earthquake was 315 years ago. There's nothing that compares to a magnitude 9 earthquake that North America has experienced in human history, says Goldfinger. Similar to what happened in Japan, FEMA estimates in this case a tsunami could hit some areas within 15 minutes. So it is very important that people living in this area should be prepared for what could possibly happen in the near future. In order to show how quickly and with little warning a tsunami can hit along the coastline of the United States, let's take a look at this video, which shows a bizarre rogue wave coming up fast on Joe Creek in Grays Harbor County, Washington State on January 16th of this year. Take a look at this. So is a massive earthquake and subsequent tsunami in the Pacific Northwest overdue? Scientists tell us it will happen at some point. It's very unpredictable as to when, so we need to be prepared. Never before has the scientific world been so specific and precise. But can they really predict an earthquake? If the big one is coming, it could wipe out thousands to millions of people. So will it really happen? Take a look at these video clips, which are actually warning Seattle and Portland residents to consider moving as soon as possible.
Pacific Northwest, I'd be considering moving. Seriously. The gist of it is this. The federal government estimates 13,000 Americans will die in a major earthquake and tsunami in the Pacific Northwest. It's not a question of whether, but when. This earthquake is coming, and it's overdue. Consider that the magnitude 9.0 earthquake in Japan, just a few years ago, remember that? Killed more than 15,000 people in the north of Japan and injured thousands of others. Seismologists say that the quake that will strike on our Pacific Northwest coastline should be even stronger, at up to a 9.2. They call such a quake a margin rupture quake, and it's every bit as bad as it sounds. Here's the reason for it. Our entire continent sits on the North American tectonic shelf, right? Plate, I should say. Off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, from the top of Washington State all the way down to northern California. This is it. And another plate called the Juan de Fuca is trying to slide up under North America, but it's stuck. We have an illustration over here in the big wall. Let me show you what this is. This is our continent here. This is the Cascada Mountains. This is the Cascadia, what do they call it? The Cascadia what? Bridge. The Cascadia Bridge. I was actually asking him, but thank you. The North American plate here and the Juan de Fuca plate here. This one's sliding up under, and eventually this is going to go down, send a huge wall of water up. That wall will go all the way over to Japan, and the other will come onto our shore within 15 minutes. And when it slips, it will unleash not only a colossal earthquake, but also that tsunami, 700 miles long, and in some places up to a 100-foot-high wall of water and whatever it's pushing, like houses and dump trucks and schools. Thousands and thousands will not escape. The New Yorker quotes a FEMA official who says, and I quote, "Our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast." Everything west of Interstate 5 is gone. That's Seattle, Tacoma, Portland and Olympia, Salem and Eugene, wiped out. Altogether about 7 million people. That's not including tourists. So think of summertime. The New Yorker reports that FEMA calculations indicate the disaster will damage or destroy about 1 million buildings, including 3,000 schools and 1/3 of all fire stations. And perhaps the worst part of all of this, these sorts of earthquakes happen at regular intervals in exactly this part of the world, have forever. On average, according to seismologists, about every 240 years. So when was the last one of these massive 9.2 or so earthquakes? Well, the last one was more than 300 years ago, the year 1700. It struck in the Pacific Northwest and sent a 600-foot wave of water all the way to Japan. So right now, on average, the Pacific Northwest is decades overdue for the really, really big one.
News Science and Futures contributor Michio Kakuka is a physics professor at the City University of New York. Good morning.
Morning.
So it's overdue. When will it might come?
Well, this is the mother of all earthquake faults. It can pack a wallop 30 times that of the San Andreas fault. So forget all the Hollywood hype about the San Andreas fault. We're talking about an earthquake, a 9.0, similar to what devastated northern Japan, which killed over 15,000 people and caused $250 billion in property damage. The last big one was 315 years ago. We think the cycle time is roughly 240 years. Do the math. We are overdue in this calculation with another big one.
So there you have it. From what we've been able to garner from the information that is being provided, both state and federal agencies are preparing for what is going to be considered historic earthquakes and volcanic eruptions along the West Coast. In addition, scientists are assuring us that these things are inevitable. In other words, they'll probably happen sooner rather than later. So let us certainly hope for the best, but let's remember that putting our heads in the sand and pretending that these dangers do not exist is not going to help matters at all. So get prepared while you still can, because at some point, time is going to run out. Now, as you can see on this website, earthquaketrack.com, that there has been more than 3,000 earthquakes in the past month of magnitude 1.5 or greater. And you can also see on the map that all of them are active. And then as we begin to scroll down on this web page, you will see the numbers of volcanoes along with the names and the countries that they represent that are presently active. It is somewhere in the range of 40 to 42 volcanoes which are active at this time, which of course is an alarming number. Meanwhile, earthquakes continue to shake the globe with increasing regularity. Just last week, Ecuador was hit by a magnitude 6.7 earthquake and a magnitude 6.8 earthquake in rapid succession. Now, the series of quakes that are happening in Ecuador now are a result of the April 16th quake, which was very devastating to the country. And we'd like to show a video to you now that will show just exactly how strong this earthquake was, just how unstable the planet has become in recent times. Over the past few days, we have seen major volcanic eruptions in Costa Rica and Indonesia. And according to Volcano Discovery, which we're showing here now, some 40 volcanoes around the planet are erupting at this present time. As you can see on this map, the red triangular icons represent the numbers of volcanoes across the globe that are presently occurred on April the 16th. So take a look at this.